All right, let's graph this line. Now notice just because it says f of x is the same thing as y. So whenever you go to graph a line, you need to identify the slope. Remember, slope is m, and in slope-intercept form, we have y equals your mx plus b. So if we identify the slope, that's 2/3. My b value here is the y-intercept, and that is -5. Now, because it's a y-intercept, I like to write my point as 0, -5, because you know it's a point. Now, in my book, the B stands for the word begin, and M stands for the word move, because that's exactly how you graph with slope and intercept. So you begin at 0, -5. So you make your dot at 0, -5. Then you move with your slope. Remember that this is rise over run. So it's y's over the x's. So I'm going to go up 2, and I'm going to run 3. And then you make your point. The whole purpose of a slope is to move from point to point. Now you can make as many points as your little heart desires. You go up 2 and over 3 again to make your next point. Up 2 over 3. If I wanted to go in the other direction, you're going to go down 2 and back 3. Down 2 and back 3. Now, my biggest beef when it comes to MyMathLab is the fact that they do not put arrows. So some of these problems in your homework is going to ask you for the domain. And remember, when you find domain and range, you look at the arrows. So where are the arrows pointing? From -infinity to +infinity. Exactly. So your domain for this function is all real numbers, negative to +infinity. Good. Remember, you do not graph with points. Graph with the slope and the y-intercept. Begin at the y-intercept, move with your slope. Let's say I have a problem that starts off like this, where you don't have an f of x already, and it's not in slope-intercept form. Get it there. Anytime you have both an x and a y in your equation, you can get it into slope-intercept form by solving for y. So because it's 5 times y, you divide both sides by a 5, and you end up with y is equal to a -3/5 x, and then there's nothing there. So when you go to identify your slope and your y-intercept, what's your slope? -3/5, good, because it's always the coefficient of x. And your b value, your y-intercept, if there's nothing back there, that's the same thing as a +0. So your y-intercept is actually the origin. Good, so you're going to start graphing this at the origin of 0, 0. Then again, you move. Now, if you have a negative slope, that's the same thing as going downhill. So remember, it's rise over run, so I'm going to move down 3. Oops. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to run a +5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get to my next point. And you can do the same thing again, down 3 and then run 5. Oops, I miscounted. 1, 2, 3. 3, 4, 5 puts us there. If I want to go in the other direction, you just go a +3 and a -5. Because remember, if you have a -3/5, that is equivalent to 3 over -5. Because a negative divided by a positive, still a negative. Positive divided by a negative, still a negative. So that just means my whole slope is negative going downhill. Oops, I kind of jumped the bump on that one, didn't I? Good. So it doesn't matter if it's already in a function form like the last problem or this problem where you had to solve for y, you're going to graph it the same. You can graph from an equation. You can also graph from any point and a slope. Remember, you do not always just have to start with the y-intercept. You can start with any point on the graph. So if you are given a point and a slope, do not make a line out of this. Do not write the equation for a line. Graph with the information that you have right now. Start with your point, 2, -3. From that point, I'm going to move with my slope. Now, if I have a whole number of a slope, you can write that as 4 over 1. So you now have a rise over run. Go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1 to make your next point. Now, you do not have to put this little mark on your graph. I'm only doing that because you can't see how my pen is moving. All you can see is what I'm saying, or all you can hear is what I'm saying, and if I mark on the graph. That's the only reason why I'm putting it on there. Then you can go up 4 and over 1 for the next point, or down 4 and back 1. Always, whenever you graph a line, you want to graph with your slope and a point. Doesn't matter if it's a y-intercept, it could be any point. You just need a point and a slope to graph. If you only have a single variable when you go to graph a line, that means you either have a horizontal line or a vertical line. Regardless, you need to solve for that variable. So here I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, and I get y equals a negative 6. This is whenever I look at my mnemonic device, H-O-Y. H stands for horizontal. O stands for a 0 slope. And y means y equals some number is the equation of my line. You can also look at this and say, oh, okay, I'm going to come down here to y equals negative 6, and it always has to go through that axis. So if I'm going through the axis where y is equal to negative 6, then notice that's a horizontal line. So horizontal lines are always y equals some number. And then it happens to have a 0 slope because it's horizontal. You can also have just an x in the equation. So again, you want to solve for x because x is negative. I'm going to add x because I want to make it positive, and that's going to give me x equals 1. Now keep in mind, this is an equation, so just because the x is on the right-hand side, if it's equal to the same thing, you can write it on the left or the right. You can have 1 equals x or x equals 1. Those are the exact same thing. I like to have my x on the left side, so that's where I'm going to write it. So same concept applies. You just have one variable, so x equals 1. I'm going to go to where the 1 is on the x-axis, and then my line is going to go through that axis. So what kind of a line is that? Vertical. And again, you can use the mnemonic device VUX. V stands for vertical. U is an undefined slope. And X means that X equals some number is the equation of a vertical line. Now, typically when you think of Y, such as y equals negative 6, you think, oh, that's vertical because that's y. No, it goes through that axis, making it a horizontal line, which is why we have the mnemonic device HOY. So if you remember these two mnemonic devices, HOY and VUX, you'll be fine. Now on MyMathLab, when you go to graph this, you make your point on whatever axis it is that you have, then just move and make another point. It doesn't have to be something specific. You don't have to worry about moving to find the next point on a slope. You simply need 2 points to make a line. So start at your axis just so that you have it on point, and then just pick another one. It doesn't really matter as long as it makes your vertical line. Awesome. There's graphing lines.